Wait, what? I hear you say, what, where is the live video that you promised everybody? Well, unfortunately, because I cannot help myself when it comes to technology, I have to fiddle, tweak, tune. I have somehow broken my live broadcast capability on my phone, and none of my other phones are up to the task. So we're going to have to do a recorded session, unfortunately, which may actually mean a more concise, potentially, overview of Under an Iron Sky, which has just arrived. It is the Thin Red Line Games' very first game. Two folks primarily responsible for the game, Fabrizio Vianello and Marco Cimino. I think I would say that correctly, maybe. Sorry if I got your name wrong. Maybe it's Cimino. We should stop there. And and it is an attempt as a first design to reimagine in 1985 the next war of the Cold War. And in fact, it is heavily built on the bones, and they make no excuses about that, built on the bones of SBI's Mark Herman design of the next war, which you've seen me play before. We got a fair way into it, playing that solo. Quite an enjoyable experience. I do believe there were some fundamental issues with the combat system, and not the CRT, but the combat system. But anyway, we're here to talk about this and not anything else. So, a 15-inch long, 3.5-inch high, and about 11-inch wide box is my best guess here. So it is a honking big game box. Clocked in, delivered at 7 pounds. How's that? It's a fairly hefty endeavor. I've already cut the shrink on the back, so we're going to rip this off and we're going to have a look at this. You'll note that the artwork is very dark, very stark, and foreboding, right? Let's I'm going to stand the box up so you can have a little bit of look at the artwork, and you've probably seen this online. I've posted about this before. A couple of times. All right, so you can get a feel for the depth there. All right, it's a nice high gloss, high quality box. It looks and feels very good. You'll note that it's a big game. So it's not that it's bulging out, just that that's how it sits. Let's put some caveats on what we're about to see and what my reactions are going to be and what my commentary is going to be. Now, this game actually puts me in a little bit of an awkward position because I am a huge fan of anyone who is going to attempt to reprint something from the past that was good. I'm a huge fan of folks who wish to do something new and different and innovative. And I'm also a huge fan of the smaller publishers who are getting out there and trying to make stuff happen and trying to do new things and bring fresh gamers and fresh life and more titles to all of us older grognards and to the up-and-comers. So that's the one hand. On the other hand, I am a little bit of a plain-spoken hard ass when it comes to quality and delivering against price for value and bringing the quality we expect in today's day and age to us at a price that allows the designer and the publisher to make money and allows the gamer to have something left at the end of the month after they've gone on the rampage of purchasing. So this game sits at the beautiful nexus of both of those things because it is a very expensive game. It's going to end up costing you $200 by the time it's all said and done. And it is a big endeavor. It is a first release. And so without further ado, let's have a look. And all my comments, you need to keep all of that in mind. So I'm not going to go easy on this, but I am going to be, try and be as fair as possible. I've already had a very, I would call it, detailed read of the rules. And we'll talk about that once we get to the rule book. All right, so let's go. So there we get this sucker off. I think I gave myself a heart attack lifting that lid off. I like publishers that go to the extra effort, which most do these days, to white wall the boxes. So here is your scenario booklet and designer notes. The scenarios are huge and extensive and detailed. There's 2 campaigns and I think 4 smaller scenarios. So you've got lots of, and when I say smaller, we're not talking 50 counters. We're talking hefty. Scenario 1 is much smaller. It's predicated around the the fall of Berlin. So you get to goof around with Checkpoint Charlie scenario and deal with now we're talking about 20 counters each, right? Maybe 20 for the Soviets and Warsaw Pact guys, and half a dozen or 4 or so for the NATO forces. So pretty straightforward stuff. There's a few additional rules in here as well that we'll have to deal with when we pick a scenario to play. When I play this, I'm jumping straight into campaign number 2, which we'll have a look at here, which is kind of starts off in a tense situation, predicated around the solidarity uprisings in Poland. Was it Lech Walesa? I think his name was. Anyway, I probably pronounced that guy's name wrong. And so it's this kind of build-up exercise that occurs, and it is quite a complex scenario. So we may make some mistakes, but I think it'll be fun to play nevertheless. Great designer notes, fantastic designer notes. I'll go that far to say, giving you a view into the rationales behind the game and why the game was designed, and how it was designed, I should say, and then really talking about the weaponry and what was available and what's included in the game based on what was available. And then, of course, there's some tips and tricks on how to play the ground war and the air war and all the strategies and all that sort of good stuff, and a nice bibliography, which led me to a couple of interesting sites. I'll just go back to that page. There's a few cool things there. There's also a nifty little YouTube video that you can see on the big board. By the way, welcome to the big board. I think I jumped straight in, didn't even say hi. I was so excited about this. That is on the Redline Games site as well, that kind of gives you the preface for the game. It's worth having a look at. It's just 4 minutes. Takes real video and then blends it in with some well done creative stuff. A D20. Which ran away. And rules. Now, here's the thing with the rules, and I think I'm going to come back to this, perhaps, or maybe even do a separate video. You're looking at that and you're going, whoa, that's a big rule book. You can get a PDF, print it out, and it'll all come out on the right-scaled American-sized paper for all the Americans that are buying a copy. And really a big thank you too, before we go any further, a big thank you to all of the big board readers and followers who have purchased, I think, just over 100 of the 400 copies that are going to be made available. So well done, folks. So big rule book. We're going to come back to this and have a talk about it. And we're going to talk about the quality of the rules in here and the writing and a few other little bits and pieces. So we'll come back to this guy, right? Now, I have not seen all of this before. I have not seen the counters other than art that you've seen on my blog, etc. So here we have air superiority areas and air superiority combat charts. So similar in concept to Next War from SBI. You take air groups, units up to 3 units, I believe, and put them in groups and lay them out sequentially. And then you're going to go and have combat and match off against these groups, depending on how many you allocate by side. We'll get into that when we start playing, and you'll see me go through this exercise many times. The air war is very different from how the air war is conducted in the next war. And I'll leave it at that. Suffice to say, it is a cleaner, more streamlined, I believe, I haven't used it yet, but reading the rules, it feels much more refined, I think is probably a good word to use. All right. Now, each side, obviously, just like in the older game, you're going to have these airfields that you're going to have to keep track of for both sides. They're going to have... and these are nice and spacious, so you can put your aircraft in each airfield, and there are helo sites as well. Then you've got unit charts, and if you've ever played the next war, you're going to look at those counters and go, oh, I understand what these are. This is my attack value, my flak rating, my defense value. And we know that combat and movement, combat is a function of movement, but here we're going to have multiple types of attack that can be conducted. We can attack. We can be in tactical mode. We can be in march mode. We can be in. We can conduct a deliberate attack or a hasty attack, and potentially, I believe, a prepared attack. But there's also the attack from march concept, which is a Soviet doctrinal construct, is available, and then there's also the some NATO doctrine. Capabilities to counterattack or preempt Soviet attacks as well, and we'll talk about some of those things when we look at the rules. I may lose my voice before we get through all this. So these are fairly clear and straightforward. On the back here, there's the battle, the sea game, the naval game in the next war was just honestly a bit of a beatdown. There were, I think, 12 turns for every single turn inside of the next war title, and this takes that construct and applies somewhat more of an abstract mode to it, and I think that they do a pretty good job of it here, managing how it's going to impact how reinforcements are delivered, how air is shipped in from the US, and of course whether or not Denmark and Norway and other countries have succumbed to Soviet influence, etc. So it's really nicely done, and all these are nice satin finished, good quality, good thickness items. We got the Revolt tables. Obviously, the Warsaw Pact is in a very different situation than it was in the late 70s, early 80s, when Next War was originally designed. And so Under an Iron Sky has done a great job here with pulling how revolts are going to be managed. And when a country does revolt, what does that really mean? And you're actually going to be putting revolt markers down on the board. And depending on where they are, it's going to impact supply, it's going to impact the number of units that may have to come back to the country, the number of units that are allowed to leave the country, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a very clever mechanic that builds on the fundamentals and the bones of the next war. Okay. I haven't spent a lot of time reading the nuclear attack table and contamination tables and the rules therein, because it's not a priority at the moment. You cannot launch in 1995, start out with a nuclear attack. So there's that. So flak and evasion and helicopter interceptions and all the special forces stuff, that's all factored into the game here, and very similar to the next war, but once again, it's revised and improved. There was a point in the next war game where I had a conversation with a couple of different folks and ended up touching base with Mark Herman about how evasion and air defense worked effectively for NATO versus the Soviets or Warsaw Pact. And there were some rules that were posited in magazines that fundamentally changed the way the game worked, and according to Mark Herman were wrong. So I think this here, what's been done here, attempts to honor the original spirit of the game, but cleans up how flak works and how SAM sites and all the rest of it are applied. So pretty nicely done. Very different, as you can see, if you've played the... Well, we're going to really crank into this, aren't we? Because we're 15 minutes already. All right, I'll try and speed this up a little bit. So here's air combat table. You'll be familiar with this if you've seen it in the past with the various modifiers and pilot ratings and good stuff like that. Ground strikes, ground combat results table, different CRT altogether, right? And I'm just going to leave it at that because this is significantly different, and there are combat modifiers that are applied, not DRMs necessarily. And you'll see how that all plays out once we have a chance to actually get into the game. Terrain charts, then a copy of all the stuff for the NATO guys. By the looks of it, wow, very, very extensive. So there's 2 sets of everything for everybody. So it looks like there's a lot of charts, but really probably not that many. Since you've got 2 sets for everybody, right? So there you go. Now, put the rules over here. Let's pull the counters out. And here's where we're gonna dig in, have a look at this, and get a feel for unit the quality of the production here. So first off, they are a fair thickness. I'm going to call these compass game thick, and you'll see. Let's sort of dig in here and have a look. You'll see that these are not struck all the way through here, so we're going to have to punch these carefully. But if you're a little corner rounder guy like me, I think you'll find that they'll be fine. So informational counters, and same on the back. Lots of chem results, and here we go. All the when you're using the optional detailed supply rules, you have to keep track to a certain extent, depending on your supply situation, your fuel and ammo and flak ammo as well, and whether or not you're in Hedgehog, obviously, as well. And then breakthroughs are just the same as ever. Let's check one of these guys out. See how these break out. Yep, so they come apart just fine, just like I would have expected from a SBI counter from way back in the day. So no problems there. All right, we've punched our first counter. Woo! All right, now here we go. We can see aircraft. Wow, they're actually quite pretty, aren't they? And looking at them in the real world, as opposed to the zoomed in look on the camera, they actually are a slightly darker color red than what's showing on the camera right now. And they are very easy to read. You can clearly see formation numbers and all the other good stuff, right? So I don't have any issues with font sizing here or not. It's all good. Let's go on to the next guy. Lots of red guys, as you can well imagine, right? A few rough edges on where the sheets are cut. It looks like the machine was a little rough on the edges there, but otherwise no cuts on counters that are causing problems, and everything is set correctly. So that's nice. Here we have the West Germans and the other European nations. Oh, sorry, East Germans. What am I saying? East Germans and the Czechs and Poles and all that sort of good stuff. My apologies on the misrepresentation of the flags there. I'll let you have a look at all those guys. Looks really nice. This is going to look pretty. This is going to look pretty on the map, Let me just focus for you. Right, there's that. Now, here we go. We've got the gallant, if not somewhat diminished, British forces, United Kingdom, the Danes, French, Italians, all the rest of it down here. Obviously lots of tornadoes, and there should be some Harriers in there somewhere. Where are the Harriers? Here we go, right there. See them. And then more French forces. Oh, were they not French? Oh, they weren't French. I'm sorry. I don't even know what that flag is, honestly. These guys here. Who are they? I should know that flag. I don't. Here are the French. The Jaguars. Sorry, Frenchies. You'll get over it. You've been maligned again. These are the West Germans. Ta-da. So you've got 10th Panzer here. Various other formations that you can see. They're the Danes down the bottom. All right, the US forces. Canadians, there's the Canuckians. I know we've got quite a few Canadian readers, so we better let them have a good look. Otherwise I complain. Everyone says Canadians are nice, but really, they complain in a nice way, and they make you feel bad. Only on the inside, though. All right, lots of U.S. forces, lots of choppers, there's the Marines, 2nd Marines there, aircraft. What do we got? I'm trying to look at these and move the stuff around at the same time. Okay, so A-10s, F-4s, F-15s, lots of A-10s, F-111s. All right, so hopefully you got to see all those. Sorry if you didn't. Okay, maps. So I'm for, like I said, we're first publication out, but that is a fine first effort. These are two little subset, zoom out here, little sectional maps that are used. And wow, these are all individually large maps. Okay, let me try and move this out of the way so we can see. Good heavy stock here for the paper. Got to be careful here because I don't want to rip these guys. And this has almost kind of a satellite feel to it, but not, right? So here's my line. Let me just get this laid out. Okay. These are obviously going to have to go on a Plex, but here we go. So Milan, Adriatic Sea. This is the south map, which would correspond to the south map in the baggies, which would correspond to the south map in the next war. Let's try and lift this up. And I'm going to show you these air zones and stuff in a second if I can, assuming I know what I'm doing. Ooh, let's flip this around. Okay, so now here we have this castle here, Frankfurt. Here, so let's get our referencing. Frankfurt. Fulda, Kassel, Gotha, Erfurt, Schweinfurt, Würzburg is here. I'm going to zoom in for you. I'm looking at the artwork, and it pops out at you, and it has a nice earthy, comfortable tone to it. There's this sort of agricultural markings on it, give it a nice feel. It was mentioned in the designer notes that there were some railroads that were and different highways that were added to the game that were missed in the original. So that's always interesting. So that'll change the gameplay just a tad. Now see these markings here on the map. This 00 here, and the +2, -2 right here. These are for the air zones, and I've got to work out how we track these bad boys. So the yellow lines are the borders by the looks of it. Where's the tech chart? Probably the easiest thing to do. I'm going to find it real quick. You got to be impressed. I haven't knocked the camera over yet. I'm waving my hands around like a madman here. With everything, there's a lot of stuff here. I'll see if I can find this terrain effects chart. Maybe not. Come on, dude. Nope, 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 nope. No. On the back of one of these here somewhere. Just gotta find my way around. Yep, nope, that's right. That's the air war stuff, I believe. Yep. Hang in there, folks. Maybe I'm not gonna be able to find it right now. Here it is, just in time. Okay, so rail, major rivers, bridges, different types of bridges, national borders, ferries. Where is it? Got these air zones marked out. That doesn't look like they do. All right, I'll have to check that. But there are these air zones, and which I think they're based on a count. Here we go. Let's see. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Oh, here it is. Here it is. Here, see this line here? See these lines here? It's very hard to see. Now, let me. It's not actually hard to see. Here we go. Here it is. Here. See this very faint line comprises 64 hexes from this center here, and that is an area, and you have to attempt to assert air superiority over these areas. So not over the much larger sectors like in the previous game, in the original game. So that is a little different, and it's going to mean that with scant resources really on both sides, you're going to have to make some hard choices about where you're going to try and assert air superiority that matters to you, and make some choices based on what you think your enemy is going to be doing, and kind of go for it from there. So here we can see these air zones, air superiority zones, more clearly on the map. So that I'm glad I pulled that other one out for you. All right, so I'm just losing my legs on my tripod here. Okay, so that's the map artwork, and I quite like it. Here's the there's a couple of tracks. The game turn track, 25 turns. I probably should tell you the scale of the game and all that sort of good fun stuff. So we can do that once we get hold of the rule book in our hands, so I can recall it correctly. And I want to show you the rule book and the layout, because I think it's quite impressive. As I printed this out and went through it, it gave me quite a good feel for the rules very quickly. Same scale as the prior system, I believe, was 2-day turns. So we're dealing with a 50-day cycle here, and each hex is, of course, like I think 14 or so kilometers, something like that. So rules are in black and white, and there are examples, but the examples are all text-based, but very clean and very concise. So as we go through this, we will find everything we need laid out very cleanly and very concisely, and very succinct as well. Succinct and concise, you could probably say. So anyway, let me get up to, where is the, I want to show you a couple of the combat modes that are doctrine based. Everything feels very similar to the next war, except it's much more clear to play, number one, and combat is a little different, and the air war is very different, and the political and revolt side of things is different, and the supply, yeah, I think the supply is basically the same, I would say. Okay, so air mobile battalions can be applied kind of on the fly here under certain circumstances. That's right, active defense, which is kind of like a can you see that there? Active defense. It's kind of like a counter-attack mechanism. You can kind of put dudes into these kind of reserve modes, and then you've got. Let me see here. That's right. There are single echelon assaults, column assaults, assault from march, concentric bonuses, which is, I think that came in the previous system as well, if I'm led to believe that correctly. Then you can do a standard assault, and just like the old days, this is built. The combat is built off of the back of movement points, right? So it's going to cost you a certain amount of movement points, and that will inflict fatigue upon you as a moving force. If you move over, 20 movement points, you're going to start incurring fatigue. And what else I want to mention? Oh, so rules in terms of layout and accuracy. I've only found one mistake so far where something refers to a case that's misnumbered, and there was a wording issue that I spoke to Fabrizio about. That it just was probably a language translation thing. I would have used the word pay instead of exact, and you'll understand when you get to the rules what I mean. It was the ability to put yourself into a certain mode, and they said you need to use exactly 10 movement points to do that, and really what they're saying is you need to pay 10 movement points to do that. And I think just that's a very, very minor quibble, and everything else in here is just I raced through these rules. It all felt very familiar to me, and where it was different, I could summarize on the margins here and summarize and net out what was going on with these rules, and it's very easy to follow all the steps and how to go about doing everything because it's all numbered and case-based, and it's friggin', I'm excited about this. The proof, of course, is going to be in how it plays, and so that's the next thing we'll do. I've got a fairly busy week this week and some travel, so I won't be setting it up tonight, but I certainly will get the maps laid out and all the charts squared away on the table, and we'll kind of go at it from there. Sorry for the long video. I didn't realize, like I said, it's a big game. There's a lot of content in here, a lot of counters, and a lot of fun, I think, to be had here. Exploring the 1985 version of the Cold War, and really excited about this particular release. Oh look, there's another D20.